When we think about keeping our brains healthy, our minds usually jump to things like diet, exercise, maybe our family history. But what if one of the biggest threats to our long-term brain health is, well, it's all around us. It's in the air we breathe. Today, we're diving into the pretty shocking connection between everyday traffic pollution and the risk of dementia. And to kick things off, let's start with a number that really frames the conversation. 1 in 10.
That's how many Americans over the age of 65 are living with dementia. It's a truly tough condition, and right now, there's no cure. But, and this is a big but, science has identified several risk factors that we can actually do something about. And it turns out, one of the most important ones has been hiding in plain sight.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by uncovering this hidden dementia risk. Then we'll get to know the invisible intruder, a little something called PM 2.5. After that, we'll look at the damning evidence, linking it all together, trace exactly how pollution finds its way into the brain, and finally, and most importantly, we'll talk about how we can protect ourselves.
Okay, so what is this hidden risk? Scientists have nailed down about 12 key things we can control to lower our dementia risk, like managing our blood pressure or getting hearing loss treated. But tucked away on that list is one we just don't talk about enough when it comes to brain health: air pollution. We're talking about the air on our daily commute, in our cities, and right in our own neighborhoods.
The main bad guy in this story is a pollutant called PM 2.5. Now I know that sounds super technical, but trust me, understanding what it is and what it does is the key to understanding the danger it represents.
PM 2.5 just stands for fine particulate matter. The easiest way to think about it is like this invisible smog made of microscopic bits of dust, soot, and smoke floating around. But the really important thing isn't what it's made of, it's how incredibly small it is, less than 2.5 micrometers.
So, just how small is that? Picture one single strand of your hair. Okay, got it? These particles are about 30 times smaller than that. And it's that teeny tiny size that makes them so dangerous. So where is all this stuff coming from? Well, pretty much everywhere. Exhaust from cars, trucks, and buses is a huge one. But it's also coming from factories, smoke from wildfires, construction sites, you name it. It's kind of an unwelcome side effect of our modern world.
Okay, so we know what PM 2.5 is and where it comes from. But how do we actually know it's linked to something like dementia? Well, let's get into the evidence, because a huge new analysis just laid out some pretty damning proof.
Now, this wasn't just some small study. Researchers did what's called a meta-analysis. They gathered up the data from 17 different studies from all over the world and pooled it all together. The grand total of people involved? Over 91 million. When you're working with a number that massive, the results carry some serious weight.
Which, of course, brings us to the real nail-biter. We've got this invisible pollutant and this mountain of data. So what's the bottom line? How much does breathing this stuff in actually increase a person's risk for dementia? And here it is, the key finding. For every single microgram per cubic meter increase in long-term exposure to PM 2.5, the risk of developing dementia goes up by 3%. Now, I know what you're thinking. 3%? That doesn't sound like a lot. But trust me, once you see real-world pollution levels, that number becomes very, very scary.
Let's put it in perspective. The recommended safe level for exposure is somewhere around 10 to 12. But in many, many parts of the world, the average exposure is way higher. We're talking 29 to 42. So that 3% risk per microgram starts to stack up incredibly fast.
So the link is definitely there. But the question is, how? How in the world can something you breathe in through your nose end up damaging your brain? Let's actually trace the journey these tiny particles take from the air deep into our bodies.
It's basically a four-step invasion. First, you inhale the particles deep into your lungs. And because they're so ridiculously small, they slip right past your body's defenses and get into your bloodstream. From there, they basically have a VIP pass to travel anywhere in your body until they reach the blood-brain barrier. That's the security gate for your brain. And guess what? They're small enough to sneak right across. Once they're inside, they can cause inflammation and toxic stress that can actually kill off brain cells.
Look, I know this all sounds pretty alarming, but here's the most important part of this whole story. This is a modifiable risk factor. That means we can do something about it. So let's wrap up by talking about solutions, both what we can do in our own lives and what we need to do as a society.
On a personal level, it really starts with just being aware. Like Dr. Scott Kaiser says, just be mindful of the air quality. You probably have a weather app on your phone that tells you right now,
If it's a bad air day, maybe that's the day to exercise inside instead of going for a run along a busy street. It sounds simple, but those little choices really can make a difference.
But let's be real. Individual choices can only go so far. A problem this big needs big, collective solutions. As researcher Dr. Janet Martin says, this kind of evidence is exactly what we need to go to policymakers and advocate for real change, pushing for things like cleaner energy, tougher rules on emissions, and cities that are designed for people, not just cars.
So when you boil it all down, the takeaway is crystal clear. The health of our environment and the health of our brains are not two separate things. They are deeply fundamentally connected. We have the knowledge now. We see the link. So the real question this leaves us with is, what are we going to do to protect them both?